So we've got this big piece of blue wide back polka dots, and I'm going to see if my math was right and if it's big enough to use for the back of my wales. So just laying it down this way, definitely got enough length, and I think I can make my width work if I play it real fast and loose on the long arm. So cool beans that I don't have to piece a quilt back for this. I can just use this for my stash, and all I need to do is figure out some batting.
All right, today is quilting day, so I've got to go pick out some threads. I'm going to use the same pantograph that I've used before, good old ebb and flow, and to kind of give these wales some movement, and then we'll go from there. So I got home, threw the quilt on the floor to get ready to trim, and did a couple more things, started laundry, all that stuff. And as you can hear, there's some jingling going on. So let's see what somebody's been up to.
See, this was flat on the floor. Somebody is having fun with it. But so there's a couple spots that I have to do touch-ups on. There's one spot that I need to pick out a little bit. Oh, it's right here. Where it's a little bit, you can see it's darker. I didn't feel like picking out threads then. I've got to bury some threads. And then over here, something happened with my border. I'm trying not to get in the light. Something happened with my border, and this one ended up like 1/4 of an inch short. So I'm going to take 1/4 of an inch off each of the sides of the quilt before I put on the binding. But here's a closer look at the variegated thread. I've got to stitch over. I did something weird here. Where's my light coming from? It did something weird here where it like skipped a stitch, and I've just got to fix that on my machine. That should be a quick little easy blip to do. So we're on to finishing this guy.
Okay, so you saw in the quilting videos that I got it all quilted and done, obviously. And so I used, for the first time, I used the Glide variegated thread, which that is called Affinity, is the Glide version of variegated threads. I'm so glad we got these in. It was so much fun to see how this would quilt out. I think if I had done a smaller panto, like sized it down, I think the variation would have shown a little bit more, but I like how this turned out. I don't think I would have gone any denser on those. I wouldn't have gone any denser on those wales with that pantograph, just because I wanted the focus to be more on the wales. So so far all I've bought for this is the thread. It's much pricier than your normal glide thread, and the batting. So, because I was too lazy to try and Frankenstein something the night before. So now I'm going to cut the binding, and it's going to be, I've got another big chunk of the fabric that I used for the blue whales, the grunge wide back. So I'm going to cut that into strips. It's actually about 100 inches wide. So I think I'll be able to just use 2 strips and get my binding out. So I'm going to cut 2 strips at 2.5 inches wide and wind this bobbin onto a normal bobbin for my machine, my Janome, so then I can use the same thread to do my binding. So that's what's going to happen next. And by the time I check in next, we'll have a completely finished quilt. Two strips were too good to be true. Here's the end of one strip. Here is the start of the other one. So I'm gonna need to cut a little piece to put in there. Actually, I probably have a scrap laying around, but just enough to connect to these guys. Oh, so close. Whales are done. So a couple of things I would say about this project that had nothing to do with the pattern would be my fabric choices. So the Kona was great. It was your typical quilting Kona cotton, like always. But I think since my whales were cut from wide back, they didn't have as much stretch to them, like how your standard cotton has a little bit of stretch and give when you're working with it. This just didn't seem to, and I'm wondering if that has to do with how the wide backs are made. They do feel slightly different compared to the regular 44-inch wide grunge by the yard. So I'm wondering if that had some effect on how the pieces, the blocks came together, as well as the finished pieces in the end. So the same thing kind of happened with the binding. That was also cut from the 108 wide back scraps. So I think it didn't have enough stretch, which kind of was noticeable more towards the end when I got back to the bottom. It didn't quite have that same stretch, which I'm wondering if when this quilt gets washed, if that will become less obvious, if everything kind of shrinks up a little bit, or what effect that might have. So now my question for you, if you're watching this far, is a question that came up in my Quilt Guild member chat group, is that if you wash your quilt or not before you gift it. So far, I haven't, but I've in the back of my mind going, maybe I should, just to make sure things don't go crazy, make sure the colors don't bleed, that kind of thing. But I have never actually gone through with it. So are you a quilt washer before you gift? Or do you gift and give instructions of how to wash when the time comes? Or are you like me and just gift quilts and hope for the best? So let me know what you think, and let's look at some pictures of the quilt in the end.